everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Holly and today's video we'll be talking through my latest make, which is the fabulous sequin mini dress. As quickly, I always talk about what I'm wearing, and this is a me made jacket. It's new, and if you want to find out about all the details, the next video will be all about how I made this jacket. It's a really lovely make by a really nice independent designer, so make sure you're subscribed so you can see that next video. Okay, let's start with this dress. Let's talk about the fabric. I always talk about the fabric first, and for this make I chose to use this fabric. It is let's start. Anyway, for this make was an ambassador from Aniva, so this fabric was gifted to me, but I fully chose the fabric and for this make. So that's that, and I'll leave the fabric linked below in the description box if you want to shop it. So anyway, this fabric is gold and black sequin mesh is its technical term, and on it it's got this really lovely, the way I chose it because it looks really expensive. It doesn't look like that cheap fancy dress type of sequin fabric. It is like actual dress sequin fabric, and on it, if you can see, we have larger, darker black goldy kind of colour sequins, like a big ones like here, and then we have the small gold sequin underneath. The larger ones are loose, they move around, but the gold ones are on the mesh, and then the mesh is black. I don't think you can quite see it. I don't know if you can see there. The mesh is black, and then it's got gold threads running through the mesh as well. So we've got this lovely, lots of texture, lots of sparkle, lots going on with this fabric. And this is a really lovely fabric. I think this fabric also comes in different colorways, I want to say. I could leave them linked as well. If I find different colorways, I'll leave them linked. But yeah, I got the black and gold version. So yeah, that is the fabric, and it is lovely. So I'm going to then talk about the pattern that I used, and then I'm going to talk about how it's put together and how I made it and how I lined certain areas and why I lined those areas and didn't, and what I used because the fabric is mesh. And then we'll see, I'll put the dress on and you can just see what it looks like on. So that's today's video. Okay, so let's talk about the sewing pattern. For this make, I did use a sewing pattern. Normally I do like self-draft my own patterns, but I did use a sewing pattern for this one. And that's because I'd already used the sewing pattern and I had it in my mind when I was thinking about what type of sequin dress I wanted to make. I had this pattern in my head and this type of dress in my head. So as I had the pattern, I used the pattern. So it is the Sew Over It Heidi dress. Now I did hack it in different ways to make it short and what it looks like now, because it's normally, the Heidi dress is a long maxi dress with a frill on the bottom or a midi dress, and obviously I made a mini dress. So let's talk about how I did that first. So basically when I constructed all the top, everything, and then when I put the dress on, well the top of the dress on, I worked out where it was going to be sitting exactly on my waistline, and then I literally just measured where, with a tape measure on my body, where I wanted the dress to finish, knowing how the top's going to be moving, how it's going to behave with the sequins, because sometimes it does vary with different fabrics. So I literally measured from my waist point down to my thigh where I wanted it to be, took that measurement, and then on the original sewing pattern, as it's a long maxi sewing pattern skirt section, I literally just measured that out onto the sewing pattern. I've just folded the sewing pattern at where I wanted, remembering your seam allowance, added on a couple of centimetres for the hem, folded the pattern, and then that was simple as that. So that's a really easy way of just shortening a dress if you're not too sure. So that's what I did on this. I did it for all of it, obviously all the same length on all the pattern pieces, because this pattern skirt is made up of 3 pieces. So obviously when you're making that, you always need to make sure that your front, all your pattern pieces are the same length as well. Okay, so let's talk about the construction of quickly of how this dress is made up. So it's a little bit more difficult to see because we've got so much texture and sequins going on, but it is actually a wrap dress. Oh, look at that sparkle. Ooh, sparkly, sparkly. Yeah, so we've got our 2 ties here. I have to put it like that so you can see. 2 ties that tie at the front, and you can put that in a bow or a knot or whatever. And then we have the first wrap section, and then underneath is tied together with a little piece of ribbon, which I went for gold to match. And yeah, and that's the second wrap section. So that is how it's made up of. It actually has, let's tie this up again. I don't think you can see very clearly, but it actually has a very prominent waistband section which really sucks in and sits at your waist, so it's a really flattering cut as well. And that's also why I thought this pattern would work well with sequins, because sequins can add volume, it can add, you know, lots of sparkle, and it's not always a fitted type of fabric always. So I thought if a waisted section is going to be snipped in, it still gives me that definition while wearing a really sparkly textured fabric. And then we have the skirt is gathered on the bottom of the waistband here, which gives this lovely volume in the skirt. Now with the sequins, it did add a little bit too much volume for me. Like, I'm a very petite person, so when I've got a, you know, it's just like a personal style, when I have a big sticky out skirt, I feel like a child in it. So anyway, I just took out the volume in the side seam here, so it fitted me much more to my shape, which you'll see once I'm wearing the skirt. And I did that both on both sides here, just down the side seam here. And how the top is, we also has this section, 2 wrap bust sections, which have gathers up here and on this section here. So it's obviously very prominent thinking about the volume that it will create, because we've got, as I said, the texture of the sequins. And then on the back, now I really like the back section. I think it gives a lot of lovely shape, and with the sequins you can really see it. So we have, as we said, the tight waistband that nips me at the waist. We have the volume over the bottom here, which looks lovely. And then we have the gathering up here from the waistband up the back section. And in the yoke, this yoke section is gathered at the top and the bottom. I don't know if you can quite see it. So the sequins are quite hard to see. And then this is a nice flat section. So I've got this lovely volume here of real sparkle. I'm nipped in at the waist, and then volume and sparkle on the skirt section. And then we have the sleeves, which is a long sleeve. This is the sleeve that comes with the pattern. There's a long sleeve, and then it's got a cuff at the bottom. So that's quickly of how the dress is made up. My dress form's falling down a bit. My shoe is like skids down. Anyway, right, so let's talk about lining. So let's quickly, as you can see, this fabric is mesh and it's quite see-through. I did consider making a mesh see-through dress because I really like that look, and I thought I could just wear like something like this, like a body underneath with big pants, and it would look really cool. That's really in fashion at the minute, especially at the Met Gala. It was all see-through dresses. But the only thing that stopped me doing that is actually how the dress is constructed. Because we have a facing that needs to go down here, we had this waistband section that needs to be reinforced. We have the cuff section. By the time I potentially needed to have, it needed 2 layers basically to make the dresses up. So therefore I would half see the mesh section through and half not, and I'd see the facings through, I'd see the double layers through the waistband, so it didn't actually quite work out as originally planned. But anyway, so we made, it sort of worked it out of how that's not going to work. Well, it probably will work, but it probably just wouldn't look the best because you're going to see everything of how the actual construction of the dress is inside made up. So I abandoned that idea. So instead, I thought I can keep certain areas more sheer and certain areas more covered up to, again, like I said, to cover up the construction of the dress. So I made the sleeves out of 1 layer, no lining, of the sequin fabric, because that will, I think it will look really lovely let me put my hand in so you can see kind of, you can see your skin through it. It's got that movement, it's nice and light and flowy, and I think that looks really cool. But then for the cuff, now the cuff is obviously going to take a lot of, oh, also this fabric has a little bit of stretch in it as well, just to add into the difficulty. It's a little bit of stretchiness in it. So as the cuff is going to take a huge amount of in and out, you know, like that's the part that's going to take some wear, I decided to line this with some heavy weight. Now for the lining, I used some scraps. They're all like my scraps, so I really wanted to use them up, and it worked really well for this dress. So I used a variation of a lightweight black linen and a heavyweight black linen, and I'll explain why I used the different weights throughout the parts of the dress. Yeah, so for the cuff I used a heavyweight linen to line it. This is because I wanted it more structure. It needed to be reinforced on the pattern itself. This, if you're using a viscose or something, you would normally interface these sections. So that's how I kind of thought, if it's going to be interfaced, that part of that construction is going to take heavy wear and it will be vulnerable. So therefore you need something heavier to really secure it. So I used black linen on the cuff section, which has worked really well. Yeah, and that's worked well. So it gives some contrast when it's, I know it's going to be worn, but when it's hanging there, it looks quite nice. So then let's start. So for the normal pattern, if you're going to make this out of viscose, the waistband would normally be interfaced. And again, this is because this part of the dress, when you're going to be wrapping it, you're going to be wearing it, it's going to be moving and it's going to be under pressure, and you're going to be, that's the part that you're going to be keep moving. So this bit I knew that needed to be also reinforced for longevity. So again, for the waistband I used the heavyweight linen, and if you can see, oh yeah, if you can see inside, this is the heavyweight linen. Also I decided to use heavyweight linen because sequins can be a bit itchy. It can be a little bit itchy because of just the nature of it being got plastic sparkly bits on it. It can be a bit itchy. So also I wanted something that was soft against my skin, that would not make it itch. So that's also why I went for the linen. So I used the inside of the waistband was heavyweight linen. Now for all the rest of it, of the dress, it's more floaty, airy, you want some movement. The heavyweight linen would have been too harsh underneath the fabric. So I used lightweight linen to line the bust section, the shoulder section along here, the yoke section, and also the skirt section. Now I really wanted these bits to be nice and movable, so that's why I went for the lightest weight linen I can have, but I also really needed to protect my skin against the sequins. So that is the parts of the dress that I lined. Now let's talk about how I actually lined this dress. When you see, there's two ways, not two ways, but there is kind of two ways of lining a dress. You can either have your complete outside, your shell, and then you have, which is completely made up of the dress, and then you've got the complete inside of the dress, which is kind of separated but kind of attached at parts of the dress, but ultimately they're two dresses. With this, I didn't want to do it that way. Instead, I literally, when I cut out each sequin section, I made cut out the same linen version section, and then I stitched the two pieces together, which turned them into one piece of fabric. And then once they were one piece of fabric, I then constructed the dress like normal. This is just a bit easier. You just work with it as one piece of fabric. You don't have to do any extra construction of making sure the lining is going to fit inside the dress. So that's how I did it with this pattern. I literally put the two pieces of fabric together, worked it as one. When I attached it together, because this has stretch, you have to be so delicate and careful that you're not stretching the sequins out of shape, out of place when you're attaching it to the linen lining, in my case. So I basically just pinned so much around it with a gentle stitch, and I literally stitched a 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way around the edges of the two pieces together. This pattern has a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, so I can do that. If you're going to use this technique of working as two pieces of fabric as one, you need to stitch them together within the seam allowance. Otherwise, you will see those stitches on the outside of your garments, and you don't want that. So that is all the details about the dress. I'm now going to pop the dress on so you can see what it looks like on me. So here's me in the dress. Let me go back a bit so hopefully you can see and it's not too dark. So this is the dress. We've got the back. Let's come a bit closer. There you go. Can you see how it cinches me in? And we've got a little bit of shaping created by the gathering. And then this is the front with the wrap detail. Oh, look at that sparkle. My ring light is having a lovely time on that. So there was a few things that I just wanted to add with some tips of how to sew with sequins. Now, with the first one is to be careful of your scissors, because it may be mesh, but you're going to hit some of the plastic sequins. So be careful. Just be mindful of what scissors you're using. Maybe choose some older scissors. I think it will blunt them a little bit. So that's something to be mindful of. And also another thing, you need to be really careful, because you can see that the sequins, even though they're kind of stuck and they point everywhere, they do have a way that they fall. So always look and make sure that they're falling the right way, because just don't assume, because it's not an actual pattern as such, but you need to work at it as if it is a pattern, with the right way, the wrong way, the up, the down. So yes, and also when you make a sequin dress, it makes a lot of mess. So always make sure you got a hoover at the ready, because oh my goodness, I had sequins everywhere. I'm still finding sequins everywhere. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video and watching me talk all about my recent make. I hope it's inspired you and given you some tips for making your own sequin dress for this autumn winter party season, hopefully. And yes, so my next video coming up will be the video with my white jacket, which is a really lovely make, so make sure you're subscribed to see that first. Anyway, and thank you for watching. I'll leave all my links to my Instagram, my sewing blog, etc. down in the description, so you can check that out. But thank you again for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye.